On the evening of 12th of May 2018, a hairstylist known as Jennifer Seibert locked the doors of Tangle's Hair Salon in Yulee, Florida, after completing what appeared to be a routine Saturday shift, alongside her co-worker, 34-year-old mother of three, Jolene Cummings. Seibert wasn't planning her commute home. She was planning a murder and the subsequent disposal of all evidence that Jolene Cummings had ever existed. Jolene Rebecca Jensen Cummings was known to everyone as adventurous, determined, and fiercely protective of her three children. Friends described her as the type of mother who never missed a school event, who kept photos of her kids in her salon station, and who talked proudly about their accomplishments to anyone who would listen. She had worked at Tangle's for years, building a loyal client base who appreciated not just her skill with hair, but her warm, engaging personality. That devotion to her children would ultimately become the most damning evidence against her killer, because Jolene would never have willingly abandoned them, especially not on Mother's Day. But the woman who called herself Jennifer Seibert was not who she claimed to be. Kimberly Lee Kessler was born on 9th of May 1968 in Butler, Pennsylvania. In 2004, she vanished from Butler without notifying family members. Her disappearance went unreported for 8 years until her mother filed a missing person report in 2012. Investigators determined that Kessler had deliberately chosen to disappear and assume a new identity. Over 2 decades, she constructed an elaborate pattern of identity theft, spanning at least 17 aliases across 14 states and 33 cities. She obtained employment at hair salons and retail establishments under various assumed names, moving frequently to avoid detection. Law enforcement interviews revealed troubling encounters, including an incident in which she stabbed a former boyfriend with hairdressing scissors. Through falsified documents and stolen identities, she remained hidden in plain sight until 2018. Among the identities Kessler assumed was Jennifer Marie Seibert, a Pennsylvania girl who died in a car accident in Germany in 1987 at age 12. Kessler allegedly obtained the identity information from the deceased child's gravestone in Butler. Using this stolen identity, she created a social security number, obtained driver's licenses in multiple states, and secured employment records that appeared legitimate. The false documents enabled her to work as a licensed cosmetologist, with licensing boards accepting her credentials without cross-referencing against death records. In early 2018, as Jennifer Seibert, Kessler began working at Tangle's Hair Salon in Fernandina Beach, Florida. Tension developed between Kessler and Jolene immediately. Jolene grew increasingly suspicious of Seibert's background, questioning inconsistencies in her personal information. She noticed things didn't add up: the vague answers about previous jobs, the reluctance to discuss her past, the inconsistencies in simple biographical details. Salon employees testified that Jolene confronted Kessler about discrepancies in her work history shortly before her disappearance, expressing doubts about whether Jennifer Seibert was her real name. Jolene's instincts were correct, but asking questions had put her in danger. In the days preceding the murder, Kessler had been planning. On 4th of May 2018, she searched co-worker guilty of murder missing person body not found on her mobile device. Days later, she searched post-mortem changes in the body, how to use a tourniquet, injecting advice, and Florida female murderers. These searches paint a chilling picture. Kessler wasn't acting on impulse. She was researching how to get away with murder. On 12th of May 2018, both women closed the salon together. Kessler's internet activity ceased at 5:48 p.m. and didn't resume until 10:24 a.m. the next day, a 16-hour digital silence that would later prove significant. Forensic examination revealed the salon had been subjected to extensive cleanup after a violent attack. Detective Wayne Harrington stated that luminol testing revealed blood evidence throughout the facility, on floors, walls, chairs, cabinets, and sinks. All blood samples belonged to Jolene Cummings. The sheer volume of blood indicated she had fought for her life. After the attack, Kessler went to Walmart and purchased an electric carving knife, zip ties, and garbage bags. Surveillance footage captured her disposing of large, heavy trash bags in the salon's dumpster. She then drove Cummings' Ford Expedition to a Home Depot parking lot, arriving at 1:17 a.m. on 13th of May. She exited the vehicle, purchased water at a gas station, and took a taxi back to the salon area. The following day was May 13th, Mother's Day. It was also Jolene's 34th birthday. She had planned to collect her 3 children from her ex-husband for a celebration. The children had made cards. There would have been cake. Instead, Jolene never arrived. Family members frantically called and texted throughout the day, their messages going unanswered. By evening, they knew something was terribly wrong. Jolene would never abandon her children, especially not on Mother's Day, not on her birthday. Her mother, Ann Johnson, reported her missing on 14th of May, telling deputies that the failure to appear was completely inconsistent with her daughter's character. She emphasized one point repeatedly: Jolene would never leave her children. When deputies arrived at the salon, the owner called Kessler. She didn't report for questioning. Instead, she texted that she was quitting and leaving town. She later called the sheriff's office with a bizarre claim. She couldn't participate in the investigation because her ex-boyfriend was a hacker who would locate her if she appeared in official records. Investigators found Cummings' abandoned Ford Expedition at the Home Depot. 2 days later, on 16th May 2018, investigators located Kessler's black Kia Soul at a rest stop on Interstate 95, parked between semi-trucks. Detective Harrington found her sleeping inside with visible injuries, scratches, and a missing patch of hair, defensive wounds from someone who had fought back. She was arrested for grand theft auto. After 48 hours of interrogation, she finally admitted her true identity was Kimberly Kessler, not Jennifer Seibert. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Kessler's vehicle contained boots, socks, and hair-cutting scissors that tested positive for Cummings' blood. Blood residue on the salon scissors screw was confirmed through DNA testing to belong to Jolene. A search of Kessler's storage unit revealed traces of Jolene's blood, and one of Jolene's fingernails was recovered from a nearby trash bin. A small piece of evidence that spoke volumes about the violence that had occurred. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from Kessler's own digital footprint. Analysis of her internet history revealed an obsession. On the day of her arrest, she had searched Jolene Cummings' No Body, No Crime and Jolene Cummings' I Have Vanished. In the days following the murder, she had searched Jolene's name 457 times, a number that suggests not just covering tracks, but a compulsive need to monitor the investigation, to see if the body would be found, to watch the story unfold. 457 searches. She couldn't stop looking. On 7th of September 2018, Kessler was indicted for first-degree murder, though Jolene's body was never recovered. In July 2018, before the indictment, the FBI coordinated a 7-day search at Chesser Island landfill in Georgia, searching 3,300 tons of refuse. About 200 FBI personnel and Nassau County deputies rotated through the search operation, working 12-hour shifts from July 7th to 13, sifting through garbage in brutal conditions, with heat index temperatures reaching 116 degrees. Despite the extensive effort, her remains were not located. Somewhere in those tons of refuse, or perhaps disposed of in another location entirely, Jolene Cummings remains missing. Her family has never been able to lay her to rest. In the months following her arrest, Kessler displayed increasingly erratic behavior while incarcerated. In March 2019, her attorneys filed motions claiming incompetency. Judge James Daniel ruled her incompetent in July 2019, ordering transfer to Florida State Hospital, but reversed this determination in March 2020. Between April and June 2020, Kessler began a hunger strike, her weight declining to approximately 89 pounds. In October 2020, she stripped naked, smeared feces on walls, and threw feces at staff. She repeatedly made false allegations that her public defender was related to Jolene. Despite this conduct, mental health evaluators concluded she remained competent to stand trial. Kessler's trial began in December 2021, over 3 years after Jolene's disappearance. On the first day, she was removed for disruptive outbursts and never returned to the courtroom, observing via video instead. The prosecution presented forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and those 457 internet searches. The defense called only one witness and argued no murder could be proven without a body. Prosecutors countered with the evidence everyone already knew. Jolene would never abandon her children, not on Mother's Day, not on her birthday, not ever. On 9th of December 2021, the jury deliberated less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on first-degree murder and grand theft auto. At sentencing on 27 January 2022, victim impact statements were read. Ann Johnson described how her family's sense of security had been destroyed. Jolene's sister, Justine, wrote that the last time she saw Jolene was at Justine's own wedding. What should have been a cherished memory now forever tainted with the knowledge that she would never see her sister again, never get to hug her goodbye properly, never get to tell her one more time that she loved her. Judge Daniel sentenced Kessler to life without parole, stating he would have imposed the same sentence even if not mandatory under Florida law. Jolene's 3 children grew up without their mother. They never got to say goodbye. They never got closure. There was no funeral, no grave to visit, no place to bring flowers on her birthday or Mother's Day. Ann Johnson stated that the family continues to wait for Jolene to return home, despite knowing she never will. The community of Nassau County was shaken by the realization that a violent predator had operated undetected in their midst for years. But beyond the immediate tragedy lies a disturbing question. How did Kimberly Kessler evade detection for over a decade? The answer exposes critical vulnerabilities in identity verification systems. Kessler obtained employment across 14 states using falsified documents, Social Security numbers, driver's licenses under stolen identities, and cosmetology licenses bearing names of deceased individuals. No comprehensive background system identified the discrepancies between her documents and death records. The systems designed to protect us had failed, repeatedly, for 14 years. The failures were systemic and numerous. The Social Security Administration doesn't automatically cross-reference death records with active numbers, allowing deceased individuals' identities to remain viable for fraudulent use. State motor vehicle departments operate independently without interstate communication. Professional licensing boards lack standardized requirements to confirm applicants are living individuals. Employers using federal I-9 verification rely on documents presented by applicants with limited authentication capacity. Death certificates don't automatically invalidate associated Social Security numbers. Tombstone information, like that of the real Jennifer Seibert, remains publicly accessible without monitoring. No federal requirement exists to verify claimed identities belong to living persons. These fragmented systems created gaps that Kessler exploited systematically for over a decade, moving from state to state, job to job, identity to identity. In response to this case and others like it, some reforms have begun. Several states have enhanced background checks to cross-reference license applications with death records. Some licensing boards added verification steps beyond state IDs. Federal legislation for standardized protocols has been proposed, but remains delayed due to interstate coordination challenges. No centralized national database linking death records to identity documents exists. Employer awareness has increased, though verification capabilities remain constrained by existing legal frameworks. The problem is growing. Identity theft using deceased individuals' credentials has increased substantially over the past decade, according to Federal Trade Commission data. Security analysts note these assumed identities are particularly difficult to detect because stolen credentials often belong to individuals who died before establishing extensive digital footprints, like the real Jennifer Seibert, who died at age 12 in 1987 before the internet age. Law enforcement has documented organized criminal networks designed specifically to identify and monetize deceased persons' identities. Kessler's decade-long evasion demonstrates that verification systems remain fragmented and insufficient for detecting determined individuals. Experts recommend establishing a centralized federal death registry, accessible to agencies issuing identification and licenses, mandatory interstate data sharing among vital statistics offices, enhanced employer verification requirements beyond I-9 processes, and biometric authentication for high-risk identity transactions. These proposals remain debated, with discussions focusing on balancing security measures against privacy protections and implementation costs. But for Jolene Cummings's family, these policy discussions come too late. The case of Kimberly Lee Kessler illustrates what occurs when systemic vulnerabilities enable false identities, and how that deception escalates to violence when threatened with exposure. 14 years of identity fraud ended when one observant co-worker questioned inconsistencies in Kessler's fabricated background. Jolene's instincts were right. Her questions were valid. And rather than flee as she had done numerous times before, Kessler chose murder. Jolene Cummings paid the ultimate price for her suspicion. She died because she asked questions. She died because the systems designed to verify identities had failed. She died because her killer had been allowed to move freely across state lines for over a decade under stolen names, leaving a trail of red flags that no one ever connected. The systemic failures that enabled Kessler's decade-long deception also enabled the tragedy that followed. Identity theft is not a victimless crime. It's not just about credit card fraud or financial loss. In this case, identity theft created the perfect conditions for murder. The fragmented verification systems that allowed Kessler to operate undetected didn't just enable fraud, they enabled violence. Somewhere, Jolene Cummings's remains lie undiscovered. Her children grew up without their mother. Her family has no grave to visit, and every Mother's Day, they're reminded not just of what they lost, but of how it could have been prevented. The question we should all be asking isn't just what happened to Jolene Cummings. It's what we're willing to do to ensure it doesn't happen again. If this case resonated with you, we encourage thoughtful discussion about identity verification reform and the real human cost of systemic failures. For more in-depth examinations of cases that reveal larger issues within our institutions, consider subscribing.